Hey everyone, my name is Nathan Jodwin. I am a computer science major here at UNT. I thought I'd record this short tutorial to kind of go over a few important remote connectivity tools and then talk about kind of just navigating a basic Linux environment. Sorry, excuse me. I'm just going to kind of go over this list of things I want to talk about here. And then we're going to So moving forward, we're going to talk about how to connect to remote machines. We're going to talk about how to copy files to and from remote machines. And we're going to talk about how to use an extension that's made for VSCode to connect directly to a remote machine using SSH so that we can develop directly on that remote machine, edit files, save them, and then compile and test them without having to leave one application. Once we get into that remote environment, we're going to talk about how to navigate a basic Unix or Linux command line environment using commands like man, info, who am I, password, all that, or present working directory, all that, password. That is actually a command, but it's a separate command. Anyway, moving forward. So first thing you want to know how to do is get into the command line. So whether it be on Windows, Mac, whatever it is, right? Windows should have SSH installed by default from now on. Like it has been for like the last year or so, maybe a little bit longer now. But when you get into your PowerShell, if you do just like SSH, if I could spell SSH, you should see some sort of usage command like this, right? If you don't see that, it says SSH cannot be found. Then you need to install probably like Open SSH or something on Windows. Mac will have this. This is an included tool. So the first thing you want to do is you want to do like a connection on your VPN to UNT, which you should already know how to do because you need that for some other things. But I'm not going to explain that here. Go to vpn.unt.edu if you need help getting connected to the UNT VPN. Once you're connected, you should be able to SSH and then your EUID. So in my case, it's this. And then cell, and then it's 1 through 6, so 0, 1 through 0, 6. 0, 1, 0, 2, and 0, 3 are usually very busy, so I usually try like 3, 4, 5, or 6, so let's try 4-csc.eng.unt.edu. Now, if this works correctly, I should get first time asking, do you want to save this fingerprint? What that means is basically this fingerprint is a hash that's used to identify the remote host so that when you try to connect to it, you know it's the same remote host every time. Yes, we want to accept that. It's permanently adding that to our list of known hosts. If for some reason that changes, it'll give us a warning. It'll say, hey, this hash, this fingerprint's not the same. Someone might be trying to commit like a man-in-the-middle attack or something like that. And you can ask questions like, oh, did the server IP change or something? Useful to know. So normally it'll ask for your password. It'll be the same password you use for your EUID accounts across UNT. In my case, I have an SSH key set up. I can show you how to do that. And in fact, I will show you how to do that in a moment. But first, what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of say, hey, we're here. So let's talk about some basic commands that you're going to use to navigate this environment. So first we'll use clear, which is not what I have on this list, but it's useful. What clear does is it'll clear the current terminal output in your terminal. All right. The next thing you're going to do is you can use man. So man gives you information about commonly used commands. Most built-in commands in an operating system will have some sort of like man pages, they call them, or documentation basically that's written by the developers that can be used to learn how to use the command line program without having to go to the internet. A lot of people don't realize that they can do this, so you could do like something like man. It'll actually tell you how to use the man command, right? This give you a brief synopsis about all the information, and then it'll tell you if you want to read more. You can read more. And I'm navigating this, by the way, with my arrow keys. You can also use J to go down, or K to go up by lines. And then if you want to skip by pages, you can use page up or page down. But I recommend also Control D to go down one page and Control U to go up a page. And for any sort of text scrolling environment you see like this in the terminal, those conventions stay the same. So let's try another one. Let's try man printf. Printf is a C API function, but it's available in the documentation because it's part of the operating system, right? C API is available, so we have access to this documentation. So we see here, double quote, escape, / escape, all the escapes you would use for printf, and then some additional information about who the author was, the copyright. See also printf3, which you can use a different variation on the man command to kind of see what that is. There's another command that's similar to man called info, which info pages tend to be a little bit more, if they're different, they tend to be a little bit more detailed, whereas man pages tend to be a little bit more sparse. They're like the bare bones documentation, if they differ. These days, typically man pages and info pages will be the same if they exist. So if we do info printf, we get a little bit more information. This is actually like a larger document. And so in this case, I have to kind of use the arrow keys to scroll through here. You can see we have multiple sections, and this will actually give us like the entire manual for, you can see here, the entire manual section by section for printf, right? And then we press Q to get out of that interface. I don't know if I mentioned that before, but with man, it's the same thing. You press Q to escape that text interface. All right, so we talked about SSH. We talked about, we're going to start talking about man. So who am I? So who am I tells you what user you are on the server. I know that seems kind of silly, but sometimes, when you're working on like a server as an administrator, it can be good to know which account you're currently like accessed with. Now, most servers will be set up with some sort of prompt to tell you the username and the host name at a minimum, and then what folder you're in. Whenever you see this little tilde here, that little tilde, it usually means that you're in your home directory. But if you want to see what directory you're in explicitly, then you do pwd. That means present working directory, right? So that's, in this case, nfs/home/students, and then my EUID, right? And that's considered my home directory. Moving on, we can see the contents of my home directory if I do an ls. In this case, you can see I have a few files and folders here. So if I do ls-l, it'll give me a detailed listing of this folder, including the read and write permissions. So in this case, to kind of just read across this, D stands for directory, read, write, execute. Now, there are 3 categories of user permissions assigned to a file or a folder. In this case, it's going to be the owner, the group, I selected that wrong. The owner, the group, and then everyone. And this is how we assign different permissions to different people. So in this case, we can see that NJJ057 is the owner, and domain users is the group. So now, if I go to this file here, you can see it doesn't have the D flag, so it's just a file. It has read and write permissions for the owner, read permissions for the group, and read permissions for the users. That means that other users or other group members would not be able to edit this file. It's good information to know how to read. Moving forward from there, we can see do an ls-al. That's a good thing to know. It actually shows all these dot files, as we call them, are hidden from normal directory listings because of the prefixed period here, this dot. So we call them dot files. Typically, these are settings files or hidden folders, which are used to kind of configure things, and they're kept out of the way or out of the clutter from normal directory listings by prefixing with that period. The next thing you need to know how to do is change directories. So say we could do a directory listing, and I want to go to my directory listing for 3600. So I would go to cd 3600. And what that does is that says, I'm going to go from the current directory to 3600, which is a subfolder in the current directory, right? And now you'll see this has changed from just the tilde to the tilde/3600. It means I'm in the 3600 folder. Now, if I want to go up one folder, you do cd ... Now, what that says is that says go up one directory, right? If I do a cd ... again, you can actually see I'm in the students folder, right? I can see all the student folders. cd njj0057 puts me back in my home. Now, if you get lost, like I go all the way to root, right? And now I'm like, where am I? I have no idea where I am, right? You can always get back to your home by just typing cd and nothing else and hitting enter, and that's going to bring you back to your home folder where you were before. Moving down, cat. Cat is really useful for, let me go to cd cpp, cd test project, and then hello world.cpp. So in this case, I've got a file in here. It's a C++ source file. I want to see the contents of it briefly, but I don't really care about, like, I don't need to edit it. I just want to briefly see the files, contents. So I can do cat hello world.cpp, and that'll print to standard out the file contents. And then I don't remember why I wrote this. It's just some garbage file. But yeah, you get the idea, right? So another thing that you can use, I don't have this on the list, but it's kind of a useful tool, is if you want to do a like scrolled content, so like you want to see the whole content of a long file. So like for instance, this a.out binary is probably really big. So if I do a cat on a.out, it's gonna be like, whoa, what the hell is all that, right? But if I really, for some reason, wanted to go through a really long file, I don't think I have something like that on this computer. You do less a.out, and it's going to warn us, yes, it's a binary for, do you want to see it? Anyways, yes, right? And now what less does is it gives us that same arrow key scrolling or JK or Control D, Control U paging of that file. And we can use that for any file that we can use cat on in order to actually see the contents of the file. Here, it's a binary, so it's complete gibberish, but you can use that for anything. So if I had a really big text file full of like lots of like text information, that would be a good way to look at it. The next thing I want to talk about is which. So in some cases, when you're working on a Linux machine or a Unix machine, you might have this weird thing that happens where like multiple instances of a command could be installed, and you want to know which one, like where that command is being called from. So let's go back to my home directory, right? So like every command is stored somewhere on the machine, right? So like if I want to know like which CD, it'll tell me. Okay, no, it won't. So which ls. So in this case, you say ls is user bin ls, and so that gives us the path to that. So if you're ever kind of need to troubleshoot something, this does come up sometimes. It's like, oh, where is it being called from? Is it being called from user bin, which is like the normal executable directory, or is it being called from like a custom directory, like user local bin, something like that? It's a little beyond the scope of what we're talking about, but it's kind of just a neat command. It's useful to know where the things you're calling are located. So if you ever wanted to go like navigate to see, well, what's in ls user bin, you can see all of the built-in commands that are included with this installation of Linux and stuff that's been installed by the admins. So these are all executables. So let's clear that. Moving forward, so another thing that's useful to know how to do is most commands that you can run on Linux are capable of being passed flags. And outside of using man to see what flags can be passed, like the -a all command for ls, it can be useful to kind of understand what version an application is. This is probably one of the flags I've used the most. Outside of that, there's also the help flag. So we're going to touch on both of those. So the first one is we say, okay, well, what version of the C compiler, the new compiler chain are we using? So it's going to be gcc-v will give us a really big spit out. It's a verbose spit out, but if we want to do gcc-version, it'll just give us like the basic version tag of GCC, right? And then the copyright information. So -v is usually like verbose, or sometimes it's version. Sorry. And then -- version is explicitly version for most applications. I don't know. Do we have Go on here? We do. So if I want to go version, sometimes it's a subcommand like this without a flag. That also is a thing. So we do G++ -- versions, the same thing, right? And then the next thing is like if you want to even briefer than a man command, it's good to know how to do help. So gcc -- help, right, will give you like a basic usage statement. Well, not basic, but for GCC, I guess this is basic, yeah. So it's a basic usage statement for the application. So I guess a better way would be like ls -- help would probably be a little bit better. Yeah, so it gives you like the really important flags, and that's pretty much it. It doesn't give you the full man page. So that's good to know how to do. So we talked about ls. We're going to touch on how to use move or mv. We're going to talk about how to use cp or copy. And then we're going to talk about rm or remove. And then I'm going to explain the basics of nano, which is the most common entry-level text editor people will use for command line utility. So we're going to make a directory. That's the very first command we're going to learn how to use. So make directory, or mkdir, and then the name of a directory you want to make. So let's say test. You can see now we have a test directory at the very far right here. So if we do cd test, we'll change directory to test, and then there's nothing in here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to create a file. There is a command called touch, which literally just makes a file if it doesn't exist, and if it does exist, it updates the timestamp for the most recent access to the file. So touch is a useful command to know how to do. So we do touch test.txt. You don't have to give it an extension, but it's useful when you're organizing files to know what the file is. So test.txt now exists. If we do an ls, or if we do an ls-l, we can kind of see a little bit more information. You can say, okay, that was just created April 17th at 2304. So now if we do a nano is a text editor. If we do nano test.txt, we get an empty file, right? And we can add some content to it. So this is some content I added to the file, right? And you can hit enter to go to new line. You can paste stuff in. So if I wanted to paste something in, right? If I had something in my clipboard like SSH Key Pairs from like the title of the video, that would be like something I could paste in. Really useful, basic text editor. There's some stuff at the bottom here, which is basic controls for the text editor while you're in this mode. That little caret you see there, that stands for control. And then that letter is just the letter U. So for exiting, right, we would go Control X. Now in Nano, when you use Control X, you get a prompt if you haven't saved the buffer. What this document currently is just a buffer. We haven't saved any changes. We want to save those changes before we exit, so we click yes, which is Y, and then it's going to ask us what file name. Usually you leave this unchanged, but if you wanted to rename the file, it would be like saving as a new file. So we see enter, and then if we do a cat on test.txt, we'll see some content and a couple of new lines I added to the file. Now say we wanted to rename this file. The move command, or mv, allows us to move and rename files. So if I want to move test.txt to the same folder, but with a different name, renaming the file, we do test1.txt, an ls. Now we see test1.txt has the same content, but a different name. Now we wanted to move this to a different folder. We'd say we make a new folder, and then we want to put test1.txt into that folder. We do mv test1.txt into new folder. And that does is that says we're going to move that into new folder. Now, if I want to copy test1.txt, instead of moving it, I can do copy or cp new folder, test1.txt, right, which is the path to it. It's a relative path. Let's see, I change directory to new folder, right, and I'm in this folder. So if I do a copy test1.txt and I want to say test2.txt, right, we see there's two files. They both have the same. They both have the same content, right? And that's another neat feature of the cat program, is that you can give it multiple files and it will literally concatenate, which is why it's called cat. It'll concatenate those files and then print a standard out. And then, of course, we need to make sure that you know how to remove a file. So rm and then the file name, so test1.txt will remove the file. Be careful with this. There's no way to get that back once you've deleted that. You can actually also provide this with multiple files, just like cat or copy. You can do test2, and then any other file in that list will be removed. But once again, like I said, that file is gone. It will not be like in a trash somewhere, like a recycle bin or something. It is gone. So be very careful when you're removing files. Moving forward, I think we spent a good amount of time on that. When you're done with your secure session, so we're logged into a remote session, you want to get back to the terminal. You can either close the window, but what I also recommend is knowing how to do exit. What exit does is it just terminates the current terminal session. It also does this for your local session too. So if I do exit, right, that logs me out. If I were to do exit again, I'm not going to do it. It would close this window. It would close this shell. So I'm on my local machine again, and we've talked about all of the basic commands that you kind of use to do stuff. We're going to talk about GCC, G++ a little bit later, but first I want to go over the VSCode SSH extension. Now I know this is what a lot of people are really excited about, and after that we're going to talk about secure copy. So let me get to this. So we're on my copy of VS Code here. I don't use this very often, but like it is useful to be able to do, know how to use this. A lot of people like this. It is a really great editor. It can be turned into an IDE with some plugins. If you want to look for extensions for VS Code, you can go to the extensions tab here, Control-Shift-X to open that as well. And you can search for it, like C++. Would give you all of the like stuff that's tagged for C++. In some cases, stuff from Microsoft, right? So the next thing you want to know how to do is you want to know how to use the remote extension, right? That's the one I was talking about. So you type SSH, go to remote SSH here, and then install that. This is already installed, so it'll show you install, right? Install, bam, right? Now, what I recommend before you start using this extension is you go to Manage, Extension Settings, and then you might want to increase this timeout. Now, I say this because the UNT servers are very slow, the network is very slow. On top of that, because you're using a VPN, you're going to want to increase this timeout, or else VS Code is going to disconnect you before you even get a chance to finish like your authentication. So we're going to increase this timeout to like 60 seconds. And I know that seems like a lot, and you'll probably know before that, and you can manually terminate your connections, but like 60 seconds, trust me, it's sometimes necessary for VS Code. So I recommend increasing that. Next thing I recommend you do is you close this tab. We have this installed now. So we should see the Remote Explorer here. So what I recommend for the Remote Explorer is that we go to this SSH dropdown, and we go to New Remote, and you do the SSH connection command for the first time. It's going to save this, right? So you do SSH, and then you do your EUID like you did before, so NJJ0057 at see what I'm saying, at, so was it cell 0, let's say 04 dash CSE dash ENG, sorry, not dash, dot ENG dot UNT dot EDU. Now, like I said before, EUID at, and then the host name of the cell machine. Now, this, like I said before, can be cell 01 through cell 06. All 6 are applicable. The higher ones are typically more available. starting from cell 3 usually. Hit enter, and then it's going to ask you, where do you want to save this config file entry? And it's gonna make an entry in your SSH config for that host. So you click here, whatever your user SSH config is, or your system SSH config. Typically, it doesn't really matter because it's a single user computer. If you have multiple users on the same computer, put it on your user. It shouldn't really make a difference once you do it. And so then next thing you want to do is you want to connect, and this is going to open a remote session in VSCode. So we're actually going to close this other window, and we're going to increase the size of this real quick so you can kind of see a little bit better what I'm doing. All right, so this is setting up a remote session on cell 4. It's downloading the VSCode server. What that is actually it's going to like set up a remote VSCode server instance, and then it's going to communicate with it on the remote side. It's a really cool technology. And so now we should be SSH'd in to cell 04. Now, again, this will normally, at the top of VSCode, it'll prompt you for your password. If you have a key set up for that server, then you won't have to do that. It'll automatically log you in. You won't have to enter your password. It can be very useful. So now that we're connected, you'll see down in the bottom left, SSH, right? Editing on SSH cell 04-cse.eng.unt.edu. This is a good sign. So in our Explorer, say open folder, and now we'll see our home listing from the server. And I can go to, let's say, C++, test project, and we'll hit OK. And yes, I want to trust the authors of all. Yep, I trust the authors. And we can go to Hello World, C++, and there's our code. Again, I don't remember why I wrote this. I think it was just messing around. If we want to open a terminal, you go to Terminal, New Terminal, and then you'll see this down here. It takes a second the first time, and then it gives you a terminal, just like if you had SSH'd or puttied into your remote. It's important to note that SSH operates. PuTTY is built off of SSH. WinSCP built off of SSH. So understanding how to use SSH at its core kind of gives you a better idea of how all of these tools are actually working. This plugin also just uses SSH on the back end, so it's really good stuff. So we're in test project by default because we opened the terminal from our project folder. So if I do a listing, you'll see I can see this. All right. So say I want to remove the binary. I don't have a binary now, so I want to generate one. So we'll do a g++ hello world.cpp, and we'll give it a name. We'll say hello world. Right? You've done this before, I hope. If not, congratulations. You know how to compile a C++ source to a binary now. And now if I want to run that in the terminal, we do a /. That says I want to try to run this thing in the current directory. // is actually current directory, and then it's a file or folder in the current directory, a path in the current directory. That's what that means. So it says, let's execute hello world. And it's going to output, we fucking back bitches. All right. Now that we've done that, kind of giving you a little, tour in how to use the VS Code thing here, right? Say we want to close this folder and we want to open a different workspace folder. Basically, close folder, right? We're still on the remote. I'm going to open a different folder. We can do that. So, like, if I wanted to go 1040, practice, okay. I don't even know if I have anything in this folder. I do have some stuff in here. So, it's like, oh god, I haven't looked at this code in forever. This is gonna be a little embarrassing. So, like, C strings. I think this was literally just from one of the labs. But yeah, you can see this can be really useful. You don't have to mess with WinSCP. You don't have to mess with PuTTY. If you want to copy text from your local machine into this VS Code window, it'll literally work. Like, say I have some text here in this, like, garbage text here, right? Copy this. Copy this. I could literally just copy this right into my remote terminal, and now it's in that file on the remote machine. I don't have to do anything. It's really useful to know how to do this. So yeah, closing that. don't save. We can kind of just close the remote connection. It'll bring us back to our local connection, and then in order to start that again, we just go back to this this thing, and it'll even show us folders that we've accessed while we were connected. So if you want to go directly to that test project folder, if I double click to this, it'll take us right to that test project folder. If you want to open that in the current window, you click this arrow, and if you want to connect in a new window, you click that arrow. Going back to what we were talking about before, the last thing I want to go over is talking about how to set up SSH keys. So these keys are really useful for like setting up connections to servers so that you don't have to enter a password every time. It makes your connection more secure because instead of guessing a password, the person then has to actually like guess your key. Now, that's typically only if someone has the server set up so that you can't use passwords. But what it can be useful for, and this is for you IT people, if you set up password, like a limited number of tries on logging in with a password so that a person gets locked out or a person has to wait an extended period of time, it can be useful to set up key access as well, or you can just turn off password-based access once everyone has their keys configured, which is a little bit more complex. Someone could get locked out if you have to rotate keys or something, but I digress. It's not that important to go into the nitty-gritty. So on a Unix machine, so your MacBooks, there is a command that's like, and on your Linux computers, there's a command for sending a key to a remote server. That's going to be SSH copy-id, right? And then the username at, right, the host name. So in this case, it'd be like cell whatever, right? That's not available on Windows. It's a little bit more complicated. You can Google how to copy SSH keys to a remote host, and you'll find a really long command that you can copy and paste into your terminal after editing it in like a notepad or something. I recommend doing that. Another way, and probably the more important way to know how to do this, is you can manually add the keys to the user's file for so the known hosts file. Sorry, we'll get into it. I'll show you in a second. So it's actually really great. So moving forward here, we're going to generate a dummy key pair, right? So, oh God, it's been a while since I did this. So it's going to be open. Actually, how do I do this? It's been a little while since I've had to do this. Yeah, give me a moment and I will get back to you. Wow. Okay. I feel this way. So if you do SSH keygen, it'll generate a key pair. So we'll do SSH keygen, right? And then it's generating a public-private key pair to .ssh, and then it says id underscore ed 25519. So you can give it a specific key file name. If you've never done this before, it'll by default probably save it to like a generic name for it, right? So whatever, usually it's id underscore and then whatever the encryption type is. So id underscore RSA or id underscore ed 25519. You might want to give it a specific name if you have a plan to have like a different key for every machine. Some people use the same key for every machine. It really just depends on how you want to run it or what your organizational requirements are. I recommend having a different key for every machine. But in this case, we're going to accept the default name by hitting enter. And then we're not going to give it a passphrase. Sometimes you might want to give it a passphrase. So in this case, you would just say, okay, you have a SHA fingerprint here, and then you have a random art image. But what you can do is you basically have, it's actually created two keys. It's a key pair. So the actual private key, the key that you want to keep and you don't give to other people, is this key. It's id underscore ed 25519. And then the key that you give to other people, the one that anyone can know, doesn't really matter, is id underscore ed 25519.pub. So what we can do now is we can actually put that somewhere. We can see what it looks like. What's the key look like? So we do cat .ssh and then id underscore ed 25519. This says, oh, okay, cool. That's a private key. I'm not going to use this key, so you can see that. But it says open SSH private key. cat.ssh-pub gives us the public key. Now you see how these are different? This is a different hash, right? This is like a special hash of the private key, right? And this is the private key. These are different. Do not give your private key to other people. Give your public key if you need to. Now we're going to copy this for later because this is important, right? It's this whole line. So copy this whole line all the way, even including your username at hostname, right? Copy that whole line, and then we're going to SSH to the cell machines again. All right, now that we're in the cell machines, we're going to change directory to .ssh, and you'll see here there's a few keys. I have a private key, a public key, and a file called authorized keys, and a file called known hosts. The known hosts file is used to identify connections for different machines that connect for the first time. Authorized keys is used to identify public keys that we are authorizing to log in to our user on this machine. So we're going to use a text editor of our choice. For most people, Nano is a really easy notepad-like text editor. So we'll use this. Normally, you can use Vim as well on the cell machines. It's a little bit more complicated to use. If you know how to use Vim, great. Otherwise, just stick with Nano. It's pretty straightforward. So go to Nano, right? That's the interface. If we want to use a Nano with a file, we do Nano authorized keys to open authorized keys, right? Now you see there's a bunch of lines here, each starting with SSH RSA. Those are each keys that are authorized to log in on this machine, on that user. So we're going to do a paste from our terminal of this SSH ED25519 key. Now, what this does is this allows us to then log in on the machine. Now that you've pasted that, don't edit anything, don't backspace or anything. Do a Control X to exit, and then hit Y to save the modified buffer. I'm not going to save this because I do not plan to use this key. However, in your case, you would want to save this. You would keep the file name the same, so you would just hit Enter. I'm going to cancel, and then I'm going to exit, and I'm not going to save the file. Now that you've added your key, I already have my key added to that file, right? Now that you have added that key, if you do an SSH, it'll automatically log you in, as it has been for me. If you're not on Windows and you're on Mac, there is an easier way to add a key to a machine. So we're going to cancel this connection to the remote machine, right? And I'm going to show you SSH-copy-id one more time. And then you would do your EUID at, and then cell04-cse.eng.unt.edu. Now doing that, you only have to do it for one server. This is important because the directories are shared across all of the servers. So adding the key one time to one server adds it for all of them, and then you don't have to worry about it again. So if you do SSH-copy-id, it's going to copy that over. Once again, I've already done this, so I'm not going to run the command, but you should see a password prompt the first time you try to do SSH-copy-id, and then it'll say key was copied successfully, and then it'll say try logging in with SSH. Then after you get that success message, you'll try logging in with SSH. And that's it. Like I said, if anyone has any questions, oh no, that's not it. We have one more thing. Give me a second. All right, so last we're going to go over secure copy. Secure copy, or SCP, is a really useful command that can be used to copy files to and from a file system. So if I go to here in my directory, and let's say I go to CD, documents, miscellaneous, scripts, and remote tools. Sorry, not CD to remote tools. What am I thinking? Just go to scripts, and you can see this text file I have opened over here. If I do an SCP, and then remote tools.txt, that file on my local folder on that machine, and then I do njj0057 at, and then cell 04-cse.eng.unt.edu. And then it's important to include a colon, because sometimes the command will not recognize that you are trying to log into a remote host. It will work sometimes without the colon, but doing this explicitly says, move that file to my home folder on that machine. And then from there, if you add a path, like say I add CPP, that would put it in the CPP folder. And I can actually, because I have a remote key, I think I can tab complete. Yeah, it's the CSE machine, so it's going to be slow, but I can actually tab complete after the colon to see where I could put that file if I wanted to put it somewhere on the machine. So I could put it in like 1040 or something, and it would let me do that. I'm not going to do that because this interface is really slow for the cell machines. But like I said, so put that colon there that says, hey, I'm trying to get to a remote machine. And then if it can't resolve properly, it'll let you know. So we don't want sudo. That was weird. So we do scp remote tools.txt into that folder. You will see a little dialog pop up. Once it's connected to the remote machine, it'll actually start transferring. You'll see briefly the file transferring, and then you should be able to actually access that file on the remote machine. And you see there, it was a really small file. So it uploaded it very quickly once it actually got connected to the cell machines. And so now if I do an SSH to the cell machines, and then we do an ls, you can see, oh, remote tools is there. We do a cat on remote tools, and you can see the script that I have to the right-hand side. So that's it. That's everything. If you have any questions, just post something after this video in the help thread, and I'll try to get to it. I'll probably just respond in text. I might link a tutorial or something. If you'd like to see something else in video format that you think would be really useful in video format, let me know, and I'll think about putting something together for it. Otherwise, I hope this helped. By all means, this is not like a complete guide, but it is definitely a good starting primer for getting you in and out of the cell machines. Again, it's important to note with Windows, you will have SSH. You should have SCP. If you don't, you can install it. And VSCode is available on all platforms. Once you get into your Linux machine remotely, you can use all of these commands that I listed before. You can also use these commands on a Mac in the terminal.